Hello, Internet. This is Sophia, the Red Angel, doing my best effort on this channel to produce content that is worth your time to watch and listen to. Today, I would like to talk about one argument against the existence of God that I have been particularly embarrassed at seeing my fellow atheists use, even fellow atheists whom otherwise I have great respect for. Yet used correctly and under the right circumstances, it can be a very powerful and sensible argument against the existence of God as defined by some versions of the God concept. What argument could this possibly be, and how could it be so powerful if used properly, but also be so embarrassing if deployed willy-nilly? I am referring to what is called the Omnipotence Paradox. Here is how it goes. You ask the theist, can God make a rock that he cannot lift? If the theist says no, then that is an admission that there is a limitation to what God can do, and therefore that he is not really omnipotent. On the other hand, if the theist says yes, then the second question is, can he then lift it? Again, if the answer to the second question is no, then once again, we have demonstrated that there is something that this alleged God cannot do, and thereby proven that he is not omnipotent. And if the answer to the second question is yes, then that proves that God had not really created a rock he could not lift in response to question 1, and could not really have done so, thereby effectively changing the answer to question 1 from yes to no, again proving that there is something that this supposed God cannot do, again showing that he is not omnipotent. So in short, no matter how one answers those questions, it ultimately leads to the demonstration that there is something that the alleged God cannot do, proving that this being is not omnipotent, and therefore not God by any definition of the God concept that requires omnipotence. So, how can this argument be deployed improperly? And what is the problem in doing so? Well, this argument assumes that the form of omnipotence referenced in the God concept that the theist is defending is unqualified omnipotence, which can result in this argument being quite an embarrassment if that has not first been properly established. For that reason, the argument should not be deployed until that has been established. But what is unqualified omnipotence? Well, to say that a being is omnipotent is to say that the being can do anything. However, there are two ways that this can be interpreted. One method of interpreting it is what I refer to as qualified omnipotence, which means the ability to do anything as long as it is logically possible. The other interpretation is what I refer to as unqualified omnipotence, which is the ability to do anything regardless of whether or not it is logically possible. If the God whom the theist is defending is one of qualified omnipotence, then that theist has a very simple way of navigating the omnipotence paradox. While a being of unqualified omnipotence can create anything at all, a being of qualified omnipotence can only create things that can conceptually exist. So you ask this theist if God can create a rock he cannot lift. Well, there is not even conceptually a such thing as a rock that an omnipotent being cannot lift. Therefore, their answer is no. God cannot create a rock that he cannot lift. And while this answer would demonstrate a lack of unqualified omnipotence on the basis that you can name something that this God cannot do, it does not demonstrate a lack of qualified omnipotence, because the only reason God cannot do it is because it is not logically possible. Some atheist counter-apologists try to get around this by providing arguments as to why qualified omnipotence does not actually count as omnipotence. I would caution any atheist to avoid doing this. If you do this, you are getting into the business of telling other people what their position is, something that any atheist who has done much in counter-apologetics knows is a huge no-no. Telling other people what their position is something that these same atheists will decry when a theist apologist tells them that they should not identify as atheist unless they are 100% convinced that no God by any versions of the God concept exists. So we, likewise, should avoid doing that to theists. No, if a theist responds to the Omnipotence Paradox by explaining that their God is of qualified omnipotence, i.e., that their God can only do what is logically possible, that claim of theirs must be accepted unless it can be shown that they do not consistently maintain that. Now, you might be thinking, if what I just said is so, then how can this argument ever be useful? Surely any theist will just hide behind the notion of qualified omnipotence. Even if they do not consistently maintain this, they will never admit to it. What are we to do? Well, sometimes demonstrating a lack of consistency of that position on their part can be easier than you think, as too often Christian apologists cannot resist using arguments for God that, often on top of other flaws, rely on God's omnipotence, being of the unqualified variety. My suggestion of when to use the Omnipotence Paradox argument is only once they are on record doing that. Ever heard a religious apologist say that when we use logic to disprove God, we are using tools provided by God against Him? Well, once you have them on record invoking that argument, you have got them. You see, by making this argument, they have reduced the rules of logic to something that they allege is merely part of God's creation, thereby inherently rejecting the notion that those laws are binding even on Him. Based on this, it can be established that the God concept that they are defending is one of unqualified omnipotence. So once they are stuck on record making that argument, then it is time to use the Omnipotence Paradox against them. But that is not the only argument they can use that will allow you to establish that they are defending a being of unqualified omnipotence. There is also the argument for morality. Countless religious apologists have argued that to say that any act is inherently good or inherently bad, that it would have to be a God who made that act inherently good or inherently bad. We atheists have responded by explaining that there are adequate scientific explanations to how our species evolved in such a way as to have concepts of right and wrong, as well as scientific explanations as to how societies worked out the details of what acts fell into the good category and what acts fell into the bad one. But these Christian apologists responded by insisting that that is not enough. We as a society might not like certain acts and might like others, but to say that they are truly good or bad, the rules that they uphold or violate would have to exist beyond anybody's mere opinion. They would have to exist as part of reality itself. But how is that even possible, with or without a God? Things existing or not existing as part of reality are what are referred to as ontological claims. On the other hand, moral claims are part of another category referred to as axiological claims, or statements of value. Now, if a God existed, that God could ask us to do certain things and not to do others, or even tell us to do certain things and not to do others. I am not going to go into how that God could do so directly rather than rely on go-between agents, because that is completely beside the point of this episode. All that I am concerned with now is that such a God could make such requests of us. But what moral obligation would we have to do as God says? An all-powerful being, of course, could force us to do certain things, but that would not be the same as making them things that we would be morally obligated to do given the choice. Furthermore, an all-powerful, all-knowing being could reward us for doing the things that he wants and punish us for doing the things that he does not want. But that would just be giving us incentives to do certain things. It would not necessarily make those things the right things to do. And last but not least, such a God could include agreeing with his code of right and wrong among the things that are rewarded, and dissenting from his code of right and wrong among the things that are to be punished. But would that truly be making those rules an inherent part of reality? No, it would be an argument pattern known as argumentum ad baculum, or appeal to force, and you would be hard-pressed to find any serious compendium of fallacies that, upon completion, does not list that as a fallacy. The only way that even an omnipotent being can make axiological claims, such as moral claims, a part of inherent reality, the way that only ontological claims can be, is if that being's omnipotence is of the unqualified variety. So again, when a religious apologist keeps pressing the argument for morality, even after having been presented with explanations of naturalistic means by which morality evolved, that too is an opportunity to establish that the kind of God that they are defending is one of unqualified omnipotence. And once you have done that, once again, you are ready to unleash the Omnipotence Paradox argument. So to my fellow atheists, I beseech you, please do not deploy the Omnipotence Paradox argument without first establishing that the God whom your interlocutor is arguing for is not one of qualified omnipotence, but one of unqualified omnipotence. But do not lose heart. There are ways of establishing that. So, what other arguments regarding this whole God debate would you like me to discuss? Let me know in this YouTube video's comments area, or you could join my Discord and let me know there. You can find an invite to join my Discord on my main links page. You can in turn find a link to my main links page in the YouTube video description area of this video. You can also find a link there to my Ko-Fi page, where you can get updates on this channel that I am at present unable to give you on YouTube due to my current channel size. My Ko-Fi page is also where you can go if you want to support my channel financially, because if you like this channel now, you should see what I will be able to do with it when its budget is no longer limited to whatever I am able to siphon away from my personal living expenses. Also, don't forget to help my channel grow by liking, sharing, subscribing, and ringing the bell. And until next time, see ya!